We are live.
What's up, y'all?
So we're just gonna chatter with one another for a little bit, see if anyone starts watching.
Let's do our normal thing. I'm gonna start it off. I'm Dave.
This is Brian.
Oh yeah.
And this is Tex-Trek. No, we're actually just doing like a test run with our live stream format because we are making sure we get all the bugs worked out of this before we start covering Lower Decks live.
And yet, ironically, we are covering Lower Decks live.
Yes, we are because
we are covering the
TNG Lower Decks. Yeah, so like I was saying, but this will just be kind of a test run. So we already have some people watching us. We're just kind of working the bugs out, making sure that we are happy with this setup we're going to be using. Currently, the game plan is to live stream coverage of each episode of Star Trek Lower Decks starting Friday, this coming Friday, August 7th?
I think
at
so.
7:30 p.m. Central. So if people...
It's crazy. We're, 4 days away from new Star Trek?
3.
Are we?
Yeah. Thursday. Today's Monday.
Oh, it is. That's right. It's Thursday. The podcast is...
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
You and I are probably going to watch it on Wednesday night, though. So it's
we'll be up late. It'll be technically Thursday morning.
Yeah.
But yes, I will be up.
Yeah, so we're just going to be testing a few things out. But while we're doing that, we are going to discuss kind of like episode 0 of Star Trek Lower Decks. Star Trek:
The least funny of the episodes.
Well, hopefully the least funny.
Man, yeah. Well, I guess we'll know. We'll get some idea in 3 days.
Yeah.
So while we're getting ready to do that, I'm just going to test out our opening credits and see if that actually works on here. So hopefully we have some opening credits rolling in just a second.
Dramatic pause.
Yeah, I thought VLC would open faster than this.
Yeah, that's why we do the tests.
Yeah, that's why we're doing this now instead of on Friday. So now I know it'll probably be a good idea to already have that pulled up and have that on full screen.
I'll do my comedic act if we need to fill some time.
Do the Jerry Lewis bit from the Outrageous Okona.
Oh, no.
Jesus Christ. That may have been for me Star Trek at its least funny. Oh. Uh-oh. I'm not getting on.
So I have no idea how that looked to people watching, but leave a comment and let me know.
I didn't hear anything. Brian, did you? Are we supposed to have heard on our end? I saw choppy visuals,
probably.
as if the frame rate was struggling a bit.
Yes, very, very choppy. More like a slideshow. And no audio from it.
Yeah, but I'm not sure how it's going to look on the audience side.
Of course, it's always exciting to see our mirror universe selves, so that was great.
But in the meantime, we will go ahead and dive in to Star Trek: The Next Generation, Season 7, Episode 15, Lower Decks, written by Renee Escavera, with a story by Ron Wilkerson and Jean-Louise Mathias, directed by Gabriel Beaumont. And this was this is what invented the term, rather, of a Lower Decks episode. Other TV shows have since attempted this, where they're like, why don't we do a show about the little people on our show?
Yeah. They did one.
I guess I didn't know that was like something that showed up much in other shows.
It's a Babylon 5 one.
Babylon 5. Yeah, for sure. Babylon 5 did, with the dock worker strike and all that.
Well, I wasn't thinking about the strike episode, but yeah, that was a plot that sort of orbited around that. But there was one where there's these two technicians who just keep wandering around, and you get like 2/3 of the story just through them wandering into scenes while adventure is happening. And so there are lots of jokes, most of which, in my opinion, don't land like they're supposed to. But JMS is always a bit hot. Is either red hot or burningly cold when it comes to humor. But it was definitely a Lower Decks type episode. I'm sure JMS would say it had nothing to do with that Star Trek episode. But
did Battlestar Galactica have a Lower Decks episode?
It was a pretty blue collar show in general, but
every episode was the Lower Decks.
I mean, they certainly they had a lot of Lower Decks characters who had get regular arcs, but actual enlisted people as opposed to officers. But yeah, I don't know if there was an episode that specifically isolated you from the command staff so you didn't know what was going on. If you define Lower Decks as we're so low in the rank structure we don't actually know what's happening, and neither does the audience, I don't know if they ever did a BSG episode like that. So
apparently it was inspired by that show Upstairs Downstairs, which I've never seen.
So yeah, I can see that. I've only seen one episode of Upstairs Downstairs, but yeah, it had a very much the downstairs was the Lower Decks. It was the servants who worked at this rich people's house, and the upstairs was the rich people, and you'd get to see how they interact with each other and their own little A plots and B plots going on simultaneously, and would sometimes intersect.
Isn't that what Downton Abbey is like? I've never watched that, but
I've always assumed Downton Abbey is like that one episode of Upstairs Downstairs I've seen, but I've never seen Downton Abbey, so I really don't know how true that is. I assume so. My impression from watching a trailer or something here and there and hearing people talk about it makes it sound a lot like Upstairs Downstairs. But
I saw a movie called Gosford Park once that was maybe felt like the prototype for Downton Abbey, which I haven't seen, but it was definitely that kind of thing. It was a manor with ostensibly there was a sort of the A plot was that there was ultimately a murder mystery of sorts, but it was actually the A plot might have well have been a B or C plot because it was really more about the sort of class disparity and everything else was like actually much more important to it. So. Yeah, but definitely these ideas percolate. But Star Trek Next Generation was kind of the pioneer as far as TV went.
Yeah, enough that almost 30 years later, they decided to hey, let's just make an entire show based on this idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
So obviously, topical reasons for why we're talking about this.
And somebody said, let's make a show about where it's all about the lower decks of the starship. And the other guy said, that would be silly. And they said, well, then we'll make it a comedy.
I kind of like it. I assume that is 100% accurate as to how it happened.
Although there is some comedy built into this episode. It does make me chuckle.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It might also make you cry by the end.
Yeah, it's an interesting little ups and downs episode. I don't know, maybe a little bit of a criticism about that, even though it does work, but I want to kind of wait till we get to it.
Well, let's get to it then. I'm just going to go ahead and read the synopsis that's up on Memory Alpha for this episode. But junior officers speculate on the reasons for recent unusual actions taken by the command crew near the Cardassian border. And yeah, we get to see the interactions of some, what I'll refer to as the lower deckers, but it's like an actual naval term, is the lower decks on board a ship. You have your upper deck and your lower deck, and it was cool to like imagine these characters having like recurring conversations with each other, and kind of like they feel like they're like their own show that we've never seen, and they have their own waiter who's kind of like their like little Guinan, and then they have like their own guy who wants to be like Riker, who's obviously going to be the inspiration for the character Ensign Boimler, and their own security person. So it felt like Star Trek cast kind of
more the slightly more upbeat, and the guy is the kind of more, I don't know, kind of slightly angry anxiety, maybe.
He has the same daddy issues that Will Riker has, but he never got to date Counselor Troy.
Yeah, that could be the problem. There's even some implication in here that Riker might have started out like the character Lavelle. I'm just gonna post up some visual images that we have. And thank you, everyone, for being patient and bearing with me as I stumble through this. Like I said, we're just doing kind of a test drive, figuring out this new format that we're going to start using every Friday at 7:30 p.m. Central to discuss each week's episode of Star Trek Lower Decks.
You know, something I liked about this very scene that we're looking at is that right from the get-go, we're kind of seeing these more humanizing moments than we do in some other Star Treks. Here we see like Deanna and Riker doing drudge work, something that they don't really want to do. Hey, there's a train going by right when I'm talking. It's very that's live TV for you. But yeah, it's like we always see them doing these kind of big it's the big show stuff where they're, it's dealing with some first contact situation or some dangerous situation. Here, they're griping about basically doing paperwork.
Well, it occurred to me that Chakotay probably hated this job so much, especially with the counselor on Voyager being dead, so he had to do it by himself, that he never did it. And that's why Harry Kim stayed an ensign for 7 years. He's like, yeah, I'm not doing this. I'm a Maquis terrorist. I don't do personnel reviews.
Was Chakotay before the Maquis days? Was he Starfleet?
Yes.
Yes. I don't know what.
Brian, I thought you were going to say that he had to do paperwork for Starfleet, and that made him go join terrorists.
But yeah, this sets up the big idea of the episode is that right now is like promotion time. They are doing the crew evaluation, and everyone is worried about if they're going to get the promotion they want or who is going to get assigned the new position. They're competing over, I guess, like the ops station on the night shift.
Yeah. Which I was like, okay, so Lavelle, I guess, I think that's how you say his name. He is he's in command in some way, and apparently a flight control officer. And then we have Sito Jax, who's a security guards person, whatever they call them in Star Trek. And I'm like, neither of these people sound like they've been trained to run operations, which is basically more of a resource allocation type job. And a coordination between various departments and an administrative job. And the uniform colors apparently mean nothing for deciding who gets these jobs.
Yeah, sometimes sometimes with Trek, as far as like any of the command structure and all of that stuff, sometimes you have to squint a little bit.
Yeah. It felt like the Turok.
Yeah, we're gonna get through all of the characters. We're gonna look at them one by one.
Yeah.
So he's the anxious one. We saw him. Yeah, he's the anxious one
out about his career, which in the promotional material we've seen for Lower Decks, that's a lot like Ensign Boimler.
Yeah,
it's not as cartoony.
Yeah,
right.
Though he was kind of cartoony. They people compared him to Riker, but I was like, I don't think Riker was ever quite this unhip. So
Right.
I feel like Riker came out, was sitting in the baby carry in the bassinet as a baby, winking at any hot girl that made goo eyes at him.
It's also kind of hard to picture Captain Kirk as a stack of book with legs, according to
True.
But yeah, we also have a character that we've already seen a lot on the show in the background, but Nurse Lisa Ogawa.
Yep.
And she, works with Dr. Crusher in sickbay and is about to, I guess, finally get promoted. I guess she was an ensign the whole time until season 7, until here, and she finally gets to make lieutenant.
Those are some nice, disco, and I don't mean Star Trek Discovery. I mean disco, like the 70s sheets that they've got there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my grandmother probably covered the couch with that at some point.
And we have another recurring character with Ensign Sito returning from one of my favorite episodes, The First Duty.
Yeah. I guess question: do we like the idea that they grabbed some lesser known characters that we have seen before? We approve of that, or would we have liked to seen all new characters with this?
I love that they're using the continuity. I always say use some of the stuff that you have.
Right. And that if O'Brien had still been the transporter chief, he would have been in this, right?
Yeah, but I kind of like that he was gone because, I guess Ogawa's a little bit older, but like a lot of these are like fresh pups right out of the academy.
Yeah, it's funny because they all seem hungry, and O'Brien never quite seemed hungry. I think it'd be funny if they're like, "Aren't you worried about whether they pick you?" And he's like, "No, not really." I don't see him getting caught up in that.
If you get promoted, they send you to a space station, and then the writers kick your ass every 3 episodes. It's just bad. No, I'd rather just be the transporter chief.
I do think I like Fathery that they I think it's sort of a balance. They're fresh faces in that they've never had this level of screen time. But I do think it's kind of cool that they use some characters that we're at least familiar with, because then it just makes this it just kind of adds to that vibe that this is a real shared universe, that these people do exist, and it's not just the adventures of the bridge crew.
And here's another possible connection to Star Trek Lower Decks. That show is also going to have a Bajoran security officer, although they're going to be chief of security there, but this is the other example of that.
Is that the is that the swole guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Shax.
Yeah. What was the who's the guy I was comparing him to from Venture Brothers?
I know the character.
Brock.
I've never watched that show.
Oh yeah, Brock Sampson. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that fits.
I think I watched the first 3 seasons.
What is it? Tarek there?
Yeah, does he look familiar?
No.
He should, because he looks an awful lot like Vorik on Star Trek Voyager, because they're both played by the same guy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, he also looks similar to every Vulcan I've ever seen.
Why didn't they just make Vorik Tarek then?
Because you have to pay the writer royalties for that. But the guy who plays both of them is Jerry Taylor's son, the Star Trek writer-producer Jerry Taylor, who worked on later Next Generation and then early Voyager. So
I had kind of good canon that Tarek and what's his name from First Duty both changed their names and went on to Voyager.
No, you can't make Tom Paris be what's his name in the First Duty?
Yeah, that's what I was blanking. Locarno, Nick Locarno. Yeah.
They're very different characters, and I resist trying to. I'm glad they weren't the same.
I'm just joking, but now I kind of want to imagine there's this whole cadre of Starfleet officers who've changed their names regularly.
I have a whole video on YouTube about why those guys are different characters, and it should be a good thing that they're not the same. But
I want to say Tarek rocks. He was great to see a Vulcan. It doesn't feel so special, but back when this episode was broadcast, I was like, it's a motherfucking Vulcan. Oh yeah.
But finally, the first one on Next Generation, really on the crew since season 2, the Schizoid Man, when they had Dr. Solar.
Yes. But we had prominent sequences with Spock and Sarek.
Yeah, but not someone who's like part of the ship.
Yeah. I guess it's we're still trying to differentiate ourselves from TOS kind of flex. I guess.
I think they were in season 7 and they said, well, screw it. It's not like they're going to stop watching at this point.
Right.
So, but he does a good job. He makes a good Vulcan. I can see why they brought him back as Vorik.
And Jerry Taylor says that she just believes that the two of them were twin brothers.
Sure. Why not?
Sure.
You know,
Canon accepted.
The reason I liked the character was because I loved his level of sarcasm in this. His very dry humor that came up a few times. My favorite was actually that opening sequence when the one guy is like chanting, he's like, please promote me, or whatever, Lavelle. And you know, he's like, you know, that's not going to help you or whatever. And then what's her name? Sito. She's like, you know, Bajorans actually have a certain clergy that chants 24 hours a day. And he's like, given the history of your people, I don't think that, means it works well. That was just like, that was some,
cold. That's kind of cold-hearted.
That Vulcan spitting.
Yeah. No, I mean,
it's like telling like a Jewish person, like, well, if you're God's chosen people, that doesn't really explain the Holocaust.
That is exactly what I would expect from a young Vulcan, an inexperienced Vulcan interacting with humans and other more emotional
and it actually does
species.
fit, which we will see in this very scene, and later ones, is that he, while he is enthusiastic and ambitious, he does not, he's got a little something in common with Barclay. He's not so hot at kind of knowing the parameters. He's not so great with people.
Yeah, Geordi actually likes him and finds him less annoying than Barclay, I think. Though.
Yeah.
Like,
but
he
Geordi claps back on him.
Yeah, when we have like this mystery of what's going on, what are the senior officers doing, and when he's trying to like identify the species on the escape pod they're beaming over, and Geordi's like, no one told you to do that. Stuff like that.
Also, he's just trying to like upgrade some systems and stuff, and he's got some good ideas. And then Geordi's like, all right, well, I got to roll. He's like, if you have some other ideas, he's just kind of casually, he's like, just tell me about it, let me know. And he's like, I do have some ideas. Here they are. And Geordi's like, later.
I'll let you know when I'm ready to hear about that.
Yeah.
I did think
no. Or go ahead, Brian.
I thought it was odd. There are two of them who are roommates. It's Lavelle and Tarek, right?
Yes.
And I thought, why are there roommates? The ship has like an absurd amount of space on it. They can easily see.
Yeah.
They're roommates in a vast cargo bay. They have a couple
the
of
ship is ridiculously big. Like, I'm not a big fan of the Enterprise D Galaxy class design. I think Andy Probert designed a ridiculously large ship, and it looks kind of dumb from a lot of angles. But regardless, like I have the exact same thought. I like the idea of like junior officers forced to like share quarters, but it not on the ship. Like,
no, the ship has like 3. I actually counted up all the beds on the deck plans that they were Sternback's deck plans for this ship, and it was like, what was it? It was well over 1,000. I mean, everybody could have their own nice Picard suite on this ship.
You know what's interesting? Do they actually,
it was like 2,000 or some crazy thing? It was absurd.
Do they actually make any plot point of it? I feel like nothing major comes of the fact. Like, we don't see them arguing, trying to go to sleep, or somebody's up late studying and the other guy, or somebody brings home a date. Like, there's no typical roommate problems, and they don't really go back to it. Right?
We never see the junior officers, so we wouldn't see that.
Yeah.
Well, I just
in any other episode.
They could have shown it in this episode.
And just the idea that Worf and Geordi and Data all have these tiny quarters compared to Riker, Troy, and Picard's quarters. Also, like, did they request the tiny quarters? Because everybody could have a window quarters on this ship. There's enough windows.
So then we got Ben here.
Yeah, Ben the waiter.
Yep. It's funny when he said like I'm a civilian or whatever. I kind of hadn't really thought about civilian people on the crew other than when they have like a guest star who's like a scientist or something visiting. I kind of guess I thought everybody was Starfleet.
I assumed he was the husband of some Starfleet officer or crewman or some such, and that he's like, well, I don't just want to sit around the ship and do nothing all day. I'm going to get a job. So,
Yeah, well, that was the deal when Lol, Data's android daughter, for one episode.
Yeah.
They're like, well, why don't we get her a job? And she went to work for Guinan in 10 Forward. So yeah, that's kind of the same thing. A family member on the ship. I never thought about where like Guinan's like staff came from. I just assumed they were all people who were like, oh, I just want to go hang out on a Galaxy class ship, and I can do that if I wait tables.
Yeah, I guess my assumption was that there's enough people with families that all of these civilians we see on the Galaxy class are probably family related by if some sort of part of family units that involve actual Starfleet crew members. But that's always what I've assumed, and I think that's what the novels kind of lean into as well.
This guy's as a character, he's very clearly kind of the between them, literally kind of popping in and out of both poker games and hanging with both. And this is one of those like humanizing elements that I liked early on. He spies on the officers for the juniors.
He lets them know that Sito and Lavelle are up for the same promotion.
It's one of those kind of things. Like this episode did actually a fair amount to kind of humanize, not just. A lot of things about this ship, and I liked seeing characters being a little more mischievous in this case, or weary, like with Riker and Troy doing their stuff, or kind of sarcastic with each other, as later at the poker game when Troy kind of calls Riker a little bit on some hypocrisy bullshit of his. Like all in all, this episode didn't just like it wasn't just about these junior crew members. It also kind of did some good stuff to humanize the rest of the crew, I thought.
Yeah, and it was interesting, like in the next moment, for example, when they're running drills and we're seeing like Riker he kind of comes off as like a little meaner because he's not being so chummy with our point of view characters. And he's
Riker
telling
and
them
Picard both do some drop some harshness in this. Even Geordi arguably does a little bit.
Yeah,
like when he's telling Lavelle like only one eye is sufficient. When he says aye Commander, it's like stuff like he's like I can't catch a break. This guy's like busted my balls over everything I do. I'm never gonna get promoted.
You remember? You know what'd be funny is to juxtapose that with when Riker was talking to Jellicoe, and he's like, "There's no joy under your command." And then cut to him, he's like, "One eye is sufficient."
But he admits eventually to Troy that he's kind of had enough of Lavelle, like trying to kiss ass and get on his good side to the point where it's starting to become annoying. And we see that when Lavelle approaches Riker to like try to strike up a conversation about his grandfather being Canadian.
Yeah,
but he got bad intel.
Yeah. But we got an Alaska shout out, so I'm happy.
It's
they both get a lot of snow. Brian's home planet is Alaska, like Commander Riker himself.
Yes.
But I kind of like Lavelle is a French name, right?
It's almost got to be, yeah.
Like I like they put like a little bit of thought in these. Oh, he had a Canadian grandfather, so maybe that's where the French name came from.
Boatrek points out that Picard and Riker are clearly testing them. That they are kind of giving them a little harshness as they approach the this decision-making process. But it's true, we kind of don't see that part of them too often. The one that pushes people kind of like to crack a little bit more. What's going on in this scene that you just pulled up, Fathery? Oh, that's when he's like get out of here.
Oh, that's when he went to like order a drink and he like got like the same drink that Riker was drinking, but then when he got embarrassed after he called Riker a grandfather inadvertently, like he just like left, and Riker is smiling with like those two drinks on the bar because I guess he just assumes he can drink both of them now.
I'm pretty sure he will.
That's kind of the role I take if I'm sitting at a bar. Like I let bartenders know, like I drink all mistakes. Like if you mix the wrong drink or something and someone sends it back, like I'll dispose of it for you.
That sounds like an alcoholic.
And there are these mysteries thickening on the ship. Like when they're beaming a Cardassian into sickbay. I kind of loved that effect where you can't tell exactly what they beamed in.
Yeah, they edited that shot. They cut away right as the flickering beaming effect was fading away. Something I noticed about this episode is I think it was like kind of more tightly edited than most, probably because they had those 4 additional cast members, or 5 if you want to count Ben. And they whenever like a scene will end with one of them interacting with like one of the senior officers, there's kind of like quick hard cuts, and I actually kind of like the pacing it creates, where they're just like always kind of boom boom jumping around someplace. It had pretty energetic quality, I thought.
Yeah.
I noticed sickbay is actually lit much dimmer than it usually is, and has that purple light that's gleaming off of all of the silver sheets there.
That's because I have no idea why they're doing it, but I can imagine because there's sort of clandestine stuff going on, they might have thought like, let's light it dim because it's mysterious.
Yeah, I can.
Cardassians like darker light, so they were doing that to like help them recover.
Is it also possible that these are all people from the mirror universe? Just a thought.
Because the light is different there.
That would explain Riker being such a dick. And even Picard's mindfuckery. So.
Yeah, and I like Geordi ordering Tarek. I'm never sure if I'm saying it right. But he's ordering him, like, shoot up the shuttlecraft with a phaser rifle. He's like, oh, that seems really weird. But
I mean, it does seem a little bit weird to ask one of the junior officers to go and do something that, I don't know if, like, does any of that stuff, like, is it illegal? Like, I was trying to figure that out. They were certainly trying to use subterfuge and, have an excuse if they had, so if they got caught that they could, they'd have a story. I was trying to figure out if any of this counted as illegal in the Star Trek for Starfleet.
They definitely violate the treaty when they actually say that later when they launch a probe across the border.
Yeah,
like Riker
that's
even
definitely
says,
a Picard, but it kind of falls under that. Picard will do anything for his crew if it means saving lives.
Yeah. And I think just the whole idea of helping, they send a Starfleet officer across into Cardassian space without getting permission from the Cardassians. So, and they even concoct a false identity for that Starfleet officer. So it's some pretty dodgy stuff by Roddenberry standards.
But probably another reason why I kind of like this episode.
Yeah.
Well, I like the mystery so much, and it's really neat to see that other side of it. Like, yeah, there's 1,000 people on this ship. Not all of them are going to know what's going on. And if we just shift our point of view to one of them, of course, everything must look really mysterious, especially if you're dealing with like top secret galacto-political affairs like this.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Borderline like Cuban Missile Crisis stuff. Like isn't there like some threat in here? Like we could like reignite a war with the Cardassians if we're not careful.
Right?
Yeah,
for sure.
Because they had just put.
And so at that point, they're like, time for a game of poker.
Yeah, like a high-stakes poker game.
Because the whole world is a poker game.
I always thought it was weird that like they played poker on Next Generation when I was a kid, because I thought Kirk and Spock playing chess was cooler.
They're like, it's funny because that's the more intellectual game, and Next Gen, the more intellectual show, is playing more of a bro game.
Yeah. I did love the poker sequence where they're cutting back and forth between the two, and yet the beats between them interface, so it's not just two separate scenes.
That was more ambitious than they tend to get with their kind of conversations in Next Generation.
Yeah.
It was good writing and good editing. Just like
there's
a little bit more structurally ambitious than they typically would do on TNG.
There's a few directors kind of known for that, and writers, and I was thinking like, back in like the 50s and 60s, that director Howard Hawks, who did the original The Thing from Another World before John Carpenter remade it, that has like all this overlapping dialogue where multiple characters are talking to each other at once. And like David Mamet, the playwright and movie scriptwriter, does it too. It's something I when it's done well, I like it. When it's done poorly, I'm just like confused. And this was an example of it being done well, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed it. That's probably the highlight. Certainly from an artistic point of view, the highlight of the episode for me was that poker sequence.
But it's also
Well, go ahead, Father.
Well, I was just going to say, this is where we get the comparison between Lavelle and Riker. And this is where Troy points out, back on the Potemkin, you were a lot like that. You only learned poker, as a matter of fact, so that the senior officers would think you were cool.
Yep. Because as we were just talking about this, Father, about Marina Sirtis's sarcasm that she rarely got to exhibit as Troy, and I kind of love her calling out Riker, who was kind of he still gets to be like the badass poker player in this, but that scene was to me more about her shutting his ass down, and I loved it.
But we do see him clean out everyone at the table. And then when we cut to the junior officers, so the lower deckers, it's a little bit of a different story with Lavelle and his failure to bluff.
Yeah, I wonder if Sito is good at this because she was so good at lying about that dead crewmate.
Yeah, and she has to lie in here. Let's talk about her. And Patrick Stewart, I always talk about how he can chew the scenes like nobody's business. But I really loved his interaction with her. And it is so like heartbreaking at first when he's really just like chewing her ass out, giving her a talking down to about how like, you went along with that lie. That shows you have no character. I can't believe you made it onto the ship. I don't know how the hell that happened.
I will say my first reaction is, if you were this upset, why did you allow her on the crew? I'm sure Riker runs this sort of stuff by you before he approves the transfers.
Well, that's kind of ultimately the thing she asks him, or maybe even in that moment she does. She does stand up to him a little bit.
It gets explained by the end of the episode. I felt like everything had been explained, but at the time I watched the scene, I was like, "What the hell?" But
she does push back a little in this scene, and then doesn't she? And then he kind of like bites down hard, and she's like, "Okay."
Yeah. But
Picard, king of mindfucks.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking when I somewhat recently rewatched the episode. The Hugh, what's that episode called?
Iborg.
At the end of that episode, he does a great job of faking out Q that he's still Locutus or whatever, and it's like it's unnerving when Patrick Stewart plays like a hard ass or goes into full tough love dad mode or whatever you want to call it. He's scary and like. I kind of wish that they did some scenes like that. It was the kind of show where we would sometimes see him talk with Troy about these things and like say, "Oh yeah, I had some trouble today. I really had to dress down an ensign, and it was difficult. Like I could feel her pain." But because we never see that happen or never see him say it was difficult pretending to be Locutus or whatever, I'm like, I guess he's into it.
It's part of the job. It's part of the job. I don't need to see him being a crybaby about it later.
But see, that's why he cracked in First Contact.
That was the whole reason they put Counselor Troy on the ship originally, was to get scenes like you just described, Dave. Yeah. And then nobody wanted to see crybaby Picard, so they kind of dropped the whole idea that these crew members are more in touch with their feelings than 20th Century Man was kind of dropped and left Troy not all that much to do until Brannon Braga came along.
But he does really sell it. Like, I'm starting to think he's Locutus.
Yeah, it's kind of true. That's the thing is like he's such a good actor that when he does these characters, even though it's a change up for Picard's usual command style, it's kind of scary.
Yeah, I guess we have to assume that Picard is about as good of an actor as Patrick Stewart is, because that's certainly you don't get the idea Patrick Stewart's holding back to make Picard less of an actor than he is when he's playing Picard acting. So
Kirk was kind of famous for his bluffs against aliens, and Picard, I don't think we think of him in that context as much, but he does pull off a fair number of bluffs like this. It's just that his tend to be kind of more interpersonal and not I'm going to trick an alien into thinking that we have Corbomite in our ship.
Well, let's just talk about like the actual mission that they end up recruiting Ensign Sito for. She has this kind of like heart-to-heart moment with Worf, who they established earlier as kind of her friend and mentor on the ship. She's part of his security team. And apparently she goes to like his karate school on their off hours.
He's really cool to her in this episode. You could argue that this is a tough love scene, but for Worf, that's really him being very nice, and he's like a pretty big cheerleader for her in this episode.
The fake Giktal ritual where he blindfolded her and then just kind of like kicked the shit out of her for a little bit.
Yeah,
but I liked it. Where like the whole point of it was like to get her to like stand up and be like, "Oh, like this is unfair. This is ridiculous. Like you can't expect me to fight you." And
I feel like I want to call out. I feel like I want to call out Worf for creating a fake Klingon ritual and devaluing all of them. I'm like, oh, and which is the next fake one, Worf?
No, see, I liked it because Worf is always so much. There's this old Klingon ritual. There's this old Klingon story. The way a Klingon would do this, the idea that he can step back from all that and have a little fun with what everyone expects him to be.
No, I agree.
And be self-aware of the stereotype that he's kind of comes off as. This is like one of the best, most nuanced Worf sequences in the whole Next Generation. Really.
Yeah. The episode, it's kind of too bad it didn't occur this episode earlier on, or I think they might have used it as a springboard for others. When I say I want to call out Worf, I say it with tongue firmly in cheek, because I like a lot as well.
And I grew up a big Worf fan as a kid. He was kind of my favorite character. When I got more into Next Generation for a little bit, he kind of like usurped Spock as my favorite Star Trek character, and it became more about Worf for me. And also because like his stuff on Deep Space Nine he had going on, but I always thought that was cool the way that he is in his own way, in a very like Klingon and violent way. He's very like supportive of her, and you know when he tells her it takes courage to say the test was unfair, and the kind of like the moral of the story that he teaches her is perhaps next time you are judged unfairly, it will not take so many bruises for you to protest. Just a very Worf way to frame that.
You know, I think one of the characters that is always fun to watch in almost any given movie or situation is like a tough sensei type guy. Whether it's like, I don't know, a traditional like martial arts movie with a sensei and Jackie Chan, or Pai Mei, but also like, I don't know, Anthony Hopkins teaching Antonio Banderas in Zorro. It's kind of always fun to see these kind of tough guys giving their grizzled version of "I'm rooting for you, but I'm not going to make it easy." Kind of.
Yeah, like a rat that teaches karate to his turtle sons.
That is another example that I had not mentioned yet. And here we have the actual mystery Cardassian of the episode.
Yes. And he's kind of a lower decks guy himself. You don't get the idea that this is this super high ranking guy who has his own starship or something. He's kind of, you know, subversively working behind the main plots of his Cardassian people. You know, the Gulls all have their big plans, and he's kind of running around below decks too. Thematically, he's kind of part of the whole thing.
It's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah,
he's sympathetic too. He's a guy who's what was he early on? Did they say he was kind of like a true believer who
he was spying for Starfleet, and we don't find out his motivation until they're in the shuttle together a little bit. But just like that awkwardness when she walks into the conference room and sees this Cardassian, because if you're familiar with the Star Trek universe in this time period, there's a lot of tension between Bajorans and Cardassians.
Yeah.
Is there a time period when there's not a lot of tension between those two?
Well, it's really late TNG really focuses on that a lot. And then, of course, like the overlap with Deep Space Nine. And even a bit of Voyager, I guess. So, yeah, in a short span of years, there was a lot of that being hammered on.
Yeah,
like
I do remember.
Baby face Cardassian, I think.
Yeah, he is. When
Picard actually said, "Oh, he is like a handsome Cardassian."
When Picard gives that look to Sito out when she's guarding sickbay, and he's, you know, I think he was going in, and he stops and looks at her for a moment, and I was knowing where the episode's going, I was like, "Oh yeah, he's kind of." I had two theories. One, that he's like, oh, I've got the Bajoran guarding the Cardassian, what happens if she finds out what she's guarding? Is there a chance? Because she's already screwed up at the academy, and is he already pre-evaluating her for this mission that he hasn't even found out if this Cardassian's going to live yet? So, which do you think it is? Because he gives her a strange look before going in, and I wasn't sure if that was do I trust this Bajoran to guard this Cardassian, or
I don't think I actually looked at it quite as deeply. I think it was a little bit more, at least in my head, was just a matter of, do I trust this ensign to, on the outskirts of this serious, very serious upper level problem. But the fact that she was guarding it does lead me to think that he may have had her in mind already.
All right. I didn't know if they'd even come up with that plan at this point or not. It's again, because we don't get to see what things from the hero's point of views.
Right. Yeah, I kind of love that though, because it is from the junior officer perspective. So who knows what the brass was thinking?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you love to be a spider under the table though, so you could find out? I thought that was a little corny. It's like almost the exact same thing as fly on the wall. I was like, you didn't try very hard to change it up, did you? But,
yeah. Why not just say, wouldn't you like to be a space fly on the wall?
An Arcturian spider.
Yeah, a Turian fly on the wall.
Yeah.
So, I might have almost liked that better, but so.
Here
they do recruit Ensign Sito to get some makeup, like this Cardassian Jorrit Dawes like beat her up. He's going to be
kind of disturbing to just see it without context or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a little disturbing in context too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea is he has to pretend to be a bounty hunter carrying a Bajoran terrorist. I guess Ensign Rowe wasn't like on the ship at this time. She was like on leave or something. They have to use this ensign fresh out of the academy. But he said that he could bribe his way through if he was a bounty hunter. So it even still like wouldn't be completely on the up with the Cardassians, but it's corrupt enough that you could get in that way.
Yeah.
Oh wait, you're screwing a Bajoran? Okay, fine. You can if you give me some Latinum and we're okay with this.
Exactly.
Yeah. As long as there's some evil nefarious that I approve of, that I can overlook all this other things. I do think, wow, he stole a Starfleet shuttlecraft, and they're just going to overlook. Well, that might start a war, but whatever, sure. You're not just stealing a civilian ship. It's an actual, as far as the Cardassians are concerned, a military shuttle, which I think had phasers mounted on it and stuff.
And kind of like the emotional conclusion of the episode is built largely around Worf's connection to this young person that's part of the staff.
A cool shot of him right there. I like that. It's a good photo, or good pick, good screen grab.
I mean, if you can ignore the fact that you probably would be able to see the side of the Enterprise on the left side of that viewport because the shuttle bays are inset into the hull, but yeah.
Don't ruin it, Brian.
But on the shuttle ride, we do get the conversation between Ensign Sito and Jorrit Dawes about how his whole thing was that he loves being part of the military. He loves protecting the people of Cardassia. However, he now feels that the military has lost sight of that protection, and it has now become a platform for ambitious goals. They're captains, the ambitious goals, like the ones we see on Deep Space Nine specifically, to kind of collect fame and glory and build career for themselves. And he doesn't want to see more war, more violence, just so these guys that are a higher rank than him can advance their career. So he's definitely a parallel as a lower deck person.
Yeah, I would say that conversation in the shuttle is some classic Star Trek there. Just two different opposing people kind of hashing out who they are and seeing the humanity in each other. That is some, that's the bread and butter of Star Trek right there.
Absolutely.
That scene.
I talk about it a lot when we discuss Deep Space Nine, because that's where Cardassians show up so frequently. But, the Klingons are about honor. The Vulcans are about logic. The Cardassians, if they're about like one specific idea or concept or aspect of life. They're about patriotism. All Cardassians are portrayed as being like extremely like loyal to Cardassia. They have like this great love for their people, and I think there's a lot of neat parallels to draw between them and the recent real life rise of nationalism today. But even here we see this Cardassian expressing like a form of patriotism, through like his military service that he feels has been corrupted, and in his own way, even though he's kind of betraying his organization he's a part of, he's doing it out of a desire to do what he sees as his duty.
Right. A higher form of patriotism than the sort of modified, corrupted version that the Cardassians are engaging in.
Yes.
And then we get the conversation in Lower Decks where
Power Rangers?
Power Rangers, what?
They've got the full spectrum of colors is all.
Oh, yeah.
Not the full spectrum. Close.
Oh, well, they're trying to figure out, what's going on. And they all have like a little bit of a piece of the story. Like Torek knows that he like had to make a shuttlecraft look damaged. Ogawa knows that there is a Cardassian on board, but
Lavelle wants them to spill. He wants them to spill it. He's like, let's all put our heads together.
But they don't. They're good soldiers. They're good Starfleet officers.
Tarek also look in that picture. It looks like he's like knocking them back.
It's been a long week, like shooting shuttlecrafts and
for sure.
Getting shut down every time you try to upgrade the engineering. And
I think it would be pretty tempting in that situation if I was one of them to be in the place Lavelle is of like spilling the beans. I'd kind of want to talk.
Yeah. It just occurred to me that Geordi and Tarek doing the shuttle shooting, it wouldn't have made more sense if it was Worf and Sito. Because, Sito's a security officer, so she's trained to use a phaser rifle, and Worf is a tactical officer, so he knows what kind of phaser damage a shuttle would get. I mean, I'm not saying it fails completely with two engineers doing it, but it does seem like it almost would have made more sense with the other two.
He was off work and had to go teach his karate class.
I guess so.
It's fake karate.
So it gave us more Tarek, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Did you buy that they stick an escape pod on that shuttlecraft?
I was wondering about that too. Like, how the hell does that shuttle have an escape pod?
Is it an inflatable escape pod? If so, where are the engines? Also,
the only thing I can think of is that the replicator on the shuttlecraft can like create it and like beam you into space into like a freshly replicated escape pod.
Yeah, see, what I would have done is just thrown dug out the old torpedo prop, the photon torpedo, put some greebles on it, and had it just sitting in the back of the shuttlecraft when they take off. And then where'd the escape pod? Oh, we saw it. It was there. If you looked, it was sitting in the shuttle. The other thing that struck me as odd is apparently the shuttle can sneak across the border with a reasonable chance of success, but they don't use that to send the Cardassian home, or not the shuttle. The escape pod can sneak across the border with a reasonable chance of success, but they don't use that to send the Cardassian home. They could just load him in one of those escape pods and shoot him across the border, and
I mean, I guess maybe its chance of success wasn't quite so reasonable.
Yeah, if this episode is evidence of anything, it's not as good as sending an actual shuttle. And he can kind of make a power move, and be like, hey, if you want me to spy for you, you better give me a fucking shuttle. Like, I don't care how you get your pilot back. I ain't going across this border in no escape pod.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Maybe he was even thinking this whole time. He was like, shit, she's going to get shot, blown up, going back. I know there's no way for this to work, but hell, at least I can make it back home.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Don't ruin him. He's a good guy. That's one of those characters we don't find out what happens to him, right? In particular?
No. There's
no
never
follow-up?
he becomes part of... Well, I don't want to spoil something for Deep Space Nine.
Okay. I was going to say they ought to drop him in, I don't know, the Star Trek MMO or something.
Yeah, you have to do a mission for him or something.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
He does sound like the sort of thing the Star Trek Online would do. So they love picking up those little threads.
The delivery when they're waiting for the escape pod. It's late. It hasn't shown up on time. And like the delivery of the information of like her death, it's kind of jarring the way that it's revealed to the audience. And they kind of hype up the suspense with Lavelle, being worried about what's going on, what are we doing, and when he's told like, yeah, we're scanning for a Bajoran life sign in an escape pod, and he starts getting concerned for his friend. And then Data's like, oh yeah, looks like I found some escape pod debris. And it's like a hard cut to Picard on the PA system, like, Ensign Sito is dead.
Yeah.
I think this almost could have been like made a little bit more emotional, and maybe it needed music that was a little bit stronger than Next Generation music was at this point or something. But it was definitely like an emotional sequence.
I thought it worked fine for me, but
did y'all ever see? Father? You watched MASH, right? Did you watch MASH, Brian?
Yes, I've seen loads of MASH.
I mean,
I'm rewatching it very slowly right now. But
the most famous scene, and of course, this character was a character who'd been around for ages, was when oh man, who is it? When he's going home, I suddenly can't say his name.
Oh God,
Colonel. Gets shut down.
Colonel. Blake, yes, that's it.
Blake,
yep,
yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, yeah, it's sort of that was fascinatingly done because they had it where they find out while they're doing surgery and they just have to keep going. But like you hear Radar's voice cracking when he does it and everything when he says it. It struck me as a little weird to kind of instantly announce that to the crew, just like on some sort of logistics level, like she was involved in a deep cover op and all that stuff. But you squint sometimes a little bit at how these things work because they're telling a dramatic story. And
he didn't really spill the beans on what was going on. Doesn't he just say like she died in the line of duty?
Yeah, but because everybody does, there are other ensigns who know bits and pieces of it.
But it's all compartmentalized.
Yeah, but if one of them were to say go and blab or take some money from a Cardassian to learn some stuff, then. But anyway, no, it's a good scene. It's a good scene.
I mean, that's the inherent problem.
Really hard
inherent problem why conspiracies never last is because if you have too many people, you can't keep them all to get them all to keep their mouth shut.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It's you're running up to this is why Section 31 would never actually exist as it's often depicted. And why we'll just declare that the Discovery was lost during the Klingon War would never work either. But I will say my favorite scene, despite the poker, loving the art of the poker, but my favorite scene is where Worf decides to go over and join them at the table. At the end there. That is that was like I don't know, that for me was the most emotionally powerful point was where Worf decides that he wants to connect with his all of her other friends and find out more about her and that's such a not Worf thing to do to go to a bunch of lower ranking strangers basically and expose that he is hurting that was I really thought for Worf that's a huge moment. So
well that's what I was referencing earlier with the emotional conclusion of I don't want to say the climax because the climax is when like we get the news that she died, but then the conclusion that follows that up when we finally have like Lavelle being promoted and it's like the most bittersweet thing when he earns the black pip of a lieutenant junior grade.
Yes,
like, I don't even know if I want this anymore.
Yeah,
this is again. I think it was a good scene. But it did feel almost, I mean, and it was weird way appropriately selfish for that character who we see as at least, I don't know, maybe somewhat selfish, that his concern was that he felt bad about his job, not that this woman had died. I know that we just don't see the reaction. It's just kind of funny. And I have seen people who are like that, where they are more in some ways concerned with how it puts them out than the actual loss of something else.
I mean, he demonstrated concern for her several times throughout the story.
Right. Well, he wouldn't be embittered over the loss of it or the thing if he wasn't. But do you see what I'm saying, though? I don't know. Just kind of this is also more of a wry observation than a dark criticism
People who have had a big emotional shock like that, their thoughts are all over the place.
Sure.
There's the little things can suddenly seem really important. I mean, the first thing that came out, jumped in my head when 9/11 happened was, what will this do to the ratings of Star Trek Enterprise? And that's the most trite bullshit thing that you could possibly think of. But that was in the shock of the moment. That's what bubbled up to the surface. And he's just been handed the promotion too. It's not like he can just ignore it or whatever and say it didn't they just set it on the table in front of him. He's got to think about it.
But if we look at this in context with like what we know of the Star Trek universe, that these people don't get paid, they work to better society. So they even have like been kind of teasing them about like, well, why do you want to work so hard and bust your ass to get a promotion? So you have to work even harder, and you have to go to bed even earlier. And but I think these people, they have certain drives, certain ambitions that are like their chief motivators, especially if they're like young and career oriented, like this guy. And so the idea that like all that stuff you were worried about, all that stuff you were stressed out about, you actually got it, and he can't like really enjoy that accomplishment now because he like whatever type of validation or sense of accomplishment that he thought would come with that has kind of been denied.
It's a hollow victory.
Yeah, that is my favorite maneuver in my role-playing games as a game master. Give the players exactly what they want, but in such a way that they can't enjoy it. That's what I love to do.
That's messed up.
You sound like an asshole then.
Yeah.
You're a cruel GM. Actually, from what I've heard from many of your games, it sounds like there's all these like sort of satisfying moments throughout it. So I know that this is not actually a sadistic thing on your part, but more of a. I think you enjoy the depth of drama there, and that's it is a great kind of drama.
Yeah.
By the way, I was just thinking about how the fact that I myself am not a wildly ambitious person. I believe I would be more of the Ben in this episode, where I'm like, I might like to hang with all of these people, but I would not necessarily have the officer ambition. I think.
Yeah. If
I wish Ben had showed more. I wish they could have done more with him afterwards.
If I existed in the Star Trek universe, I don't think I would ever leave Earth. Because there would just be like enough stuff to do on Earth. I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to go to like Cisco's Creole restaurant in Louisiana today. And then, today I'm going to go, I don't know, just visit wherever in the world I wanted to go. Like
I'd be all over the place. I'd probably never go back to Earth. I don't know if I'd be in Starfleet, though. I don't think I have the discipline or mental fortitude for that. But I would definitely be all over the galaxy as much as I could do it. I don't know what the economics of that are, but
like on Earth everything is free, so that's why
none of us can imagine. Say again. I'm sorry.
No, I just said like on Earth everything is free, so that's why I would stay here.
None of us can quite imagine a post-scarcity society of just having been raised in that. And
we have a post-scarcity society now, being that we have enough food to feed twice the number of people on the planet, and we just choose not to distribute it like that.
Right. Well, yes. And
I get what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, it is actually kind of hard to gauge what one's ambition might be. Maybe that would in fact prompt you to like get kind of bored of that stuff. However, in the world we exist in, yes, I think I would like to go and just chill out and play that graphics fighter pilot game with the circling biplanes from Star Trek 3. Yeah, I'm gonna go spend probably 2 to 3 years playing that.
See, once I settled down and got bored with traveling around and seeing all the different the Vasquez rocks on every single planet. Once I got that out of my system, I just write holodeck games. I'm absolutely sure that's what I do. I would just write holo suites. I'd probably do that while I was traveling too. I'm sure you can do that with a pad. So, but yeah.
Well, unfortunately, your hollow suites would come to life, and you would get killed by a fictional character from one of
that would
probably kind of dangerous.
Yeah, that would probably be where it ended, as I'd be playtesting some thing, and it would be one of those cruel irony things, like I just told you about, where I write a program that becomes the most popular holosuite program in the entire Federation, and it kills me. So that would be exactly how it would go.
Justice would be served.
Yes.
Whoa, Father, you went all Judge Dredd there.
So,
What else we got with this episode, though?
we've been talking about this episode for about an hour, so if y'all want to just like wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts? I do have some gore and eggs for this episode and some subspace transmissions that we received. Before we go into that stuff, you have anything else you want to get out?
I think this is a really strong episode of TNG, especially coming in season 7, which sometimes was a little unfocused. This showed that the show still had some great stuff going on in it. And perhaps, I don't know, going back to it now, it perhaps is not as strikingly fresh as it was the day it aired, but I don't think that's fair to hold against it when it was really fresh and exciting the day they broadcast it. So,
I think it's one of their best dramatic episodes overall. The minor criticism I had is that I'm not sure if it actually needed the ending where that to be so dramatic that a character needed to die. Actually,
but you hate when characters are killed. You hate when likable people die.
No, it's not that. It's that
audience members. I think.
What's that?
I think you dislike that more than most audience members, or I think you at least like you need.
I don't actually mind that the character died, but I think that this episode thematically was actually more about the smaller dramas of our lives: ambition, competition, disappointment, disappointing somebody that we respect, and so that almost felt like just too high a melodrama level at the end. It wasn't the death itself that bothered me.
Unnecessary.
Yeah, like if she were to die in some other episode, I don't think I'd have a particular problem with it.
I don't think you can do a story about the red shirts without killing a red shirt. I think that's just kind of baked into the premise. If you're doing the story from the red shirt point of view, one of them's going to die. So.
Well,
that's kind of my thinking.
They're not red shirts.
I mean, they're the no-name people that show up in one episode, and we don't see them again. And those are typically the people who we see die in Star Trek.
Because this was an episode that was about like it wanted to show you this other side, but show you that they were as heroic and and human and rounded in just in different ways from our bridge crew, showing that yes, they were prepared to do it. I think that does make some sense, but I would have also been. I think you could have introduced some other dramas into it without necessarily. Death is like the ultimate drama, but it shouldn't be the only drama. There's certainly other things that could happen. If he got the promotion, but it caused a permanent rift with Sito, or at least it seemed like it did. Something like that.
I think that would contradict Berman's or the Roddenberry rules about no major conflict.
Well, I would say I disagree with those rules. So
I tend to as well, but
so yes,
but it was never going to be that. Is my
if
point.
I ran the circus kind of thing. But I do think it's one of their best episodes overall. And I wanted to specifically say that I thought that the actress playing Sito, I thought did a fantastic job. There's something about her acting that kind of a naturalism she brought to it, where the way she handled different scenes, whether it was like a slightly lighter scene or a more serious scene, I really liked her. And in that sense, I regretted seeing just more of her character, and more of that actress kind of doing her thing. But anyway, but yeah, I think that's most of my big stuff. I'm checking over my notes here to see if there's anything else major I had to say.
Well,
I was sad that they had a scene between Beverly Crusher and Nurse Ogawa, and they sit around talking about a man.
I was going to bring that up.
Can we talk about that? Because that relationship sounds incredibly unhealthy. Because it's like, oh yeah, we just started dating, and now like he's canceling our dates. Should I be worried? And then immediately after that, it's like, guess what? We're engaged. I'm like, wow. Like, if you're uncertain if someone's like you just started dating is going to break up with you, you probably shouldn't be like celebrating that you're engaged with that person literally 24 hours later.
Remember the novelization of Star Trek: The Motion Picture? It's only a 2-year marriage contract before it expires. So marriage is not the big deal that it used to be.
I don't pay attention to non-canon.
When I was watching the thing for a minute that was bothering me was just that everybody else is kind of discussing career stuff, and Crusher and this other person had to discuss what might seem like stereotypically girly relationship stuff. But it does seem very reasonable to discuss those things. People discuss relationships,
Yeah.
and then there's that itself was all right. I do agree with Fathery that that's a kind of a. I think they wanted a sort of quick resolution that was something that would be a happy thing to juxtapose against the sad thing that happens in the episode.
Well, the novels kind of ruin that. I didn't read these novels in particular, but I've read about how somewhere they established that her husband, Lieutenant Powell, dies in the Dominion War a few years after this.
Yeah, man, that's messed up. You know what? Something I noticed watching the episode, and I don't think there was any special meaning to this, but when Sito, she kind of finds her will to stand up to Picard and all of this, and stand up for herself. But in the end, the mission she goes on is one in which she has to at least mimic a person whose will is broken. I don't know if there was any intent behind that, just dramatic irony, but it did strike me as like I felt bad for her because her death had to be was like this scary thing of barely making this crossing and then on the way back just getting blasted apart by phasers. It's kind of horrible in a way, and it's supposed to be horrible.
Those are the things. This is why I agree with Brian about the death actually being essential for this episode, because those are the things that happen regularly in Star Trek. We just typically don't have a whole point of view episode with these characters that go through that are these casualties.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of this episode, because we
I don't know if I needed to see an episode that was like sort of a. Well, I mean, there's a question of like, are you doing an episode that's about how red shirts who die, off screen, or get killed like that are human too, or is this an episode about the lives of just the rest of the crew? Unless you're buying into like the kind of the cliched idea of red shirts just dying right and left, I don't necessarily know that there's a lot to be eked out in sort of saying, hey, they're human too. I think it's to me the more important thing was just that the rest of the people on the Enterprise matter, and I because it's a one shot, I think that the dramatic death actually does kind of work for a one shot. If we were able to see more of these characters, then I would have liked it. Then that the very show that inspired it, Upstairs Downstairs, I assume didn't have a character die in every episode, just to show you that they suffered too.
But there aren't like stories about these servants or about like the people who have these servants where we see them die all the time. Like Star Trek has that, so I'm glad that they included it. I think that's core to
some degree. I think that's Star Trek. That's a bit of a kind of Star Trek meta read that I kind of don't like when fans lean into it too hard, or the writers for that matter, where I don't think that the Federation is supposed to be something that is just killing off people right and left.
It does happen on occasion.
What's that?
It does happen.
Right, we know it happens, but I don't believe that. But it also happens because the writers need something dramatic. We need to know that whatever Kirk is up against is serious, so it's going to go and destroy a colony or a planet, or it's going to kill some of his crew members. And like as a life, or like as in the life of a starship, it doesn't necessarily make sense that they would experience those kind of losses. Like if they really lost as many people as Kirk lost over the years, he would be a failure. And I don't want to look at it in that meta context. Those things mostly serve dramatic purposes.
I disagree with that, because like I think Surveying in Starfleet should have like a little bit of danger to it. And like sometimes.
Well, yeah, I don't mean that nobody died ever on the Enterprise, but like if you added it up, it would be I would say, oh, Kirk is a failure as a captain. Because those episodes took place in isolation. It was pre-serial TV. It was done in one. I don't believe we were supposed to go and count all the dead crewmen, but because we now go back and we binge watch and stuff like that, people got used to kind of thinking about it that way. And the meta look at how red shirts die kind of became the non-meta analysis of it, if that makes sense.
I don't like a lot of like red shirts die all the time type of mentality. I think that's so like overblown, and it kind of stems from like not taking the source material seriously. But I think this is an example of how to like think about that in a smart, meaningful way. Because I think that is, I mean, to me, I think that is part of Star Trek. That is part of like Starfleet people often like put themselves in danger, and I think you do need to have people die on occasion so that the audience can feel that there is danger to this. And I think for that to continue to have meaning, you need a story like this that reminds us about these people and how like each of them is important and has like their own life and their own story.
Yeah. Again, well, go ahead, Brian.
Tangentially, I just watched the DS9 episode, The Ship, and I won't get into the plot details, but there's a couple of red shirts, you might call them, who buy it in that one. And they spend a lot of time saying, no, these were real people and they had real lives and their deaths really mattered. And there was definitely this, we are not going to make these just the red shirt of the week kind of storytelling. And
I like that one too.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent bit of Star Trek. So,
Father, my only final thought was just that I do agree that since this was the only episode that we got the lower decks kind of perspective, that it worked to do that. But I guess what I would say is you should be able to tell, like, had they structured more lower deck stories in there, other dramatic stories with them that weren't just about dramatic sacrifice.
Yeah, well, I think we might get those other lower deck stories starting Thursday.
I guess we'll find out. Either that or just we'll get a bunch of fart jokes. I don't know. But they'll call them space farts.
Sparts.
Jesus. What's happened to our podcast?
I don't know.
All right,
Dave,
Father, you got some corn eggs for us?
Well, do you have like the notes that I sent you still pulled up
Nope.
for the subspace transmissions? Can you go get that real quick? And I'm going to go through these.
Yeah. Okay, I've got them.
Again, anyone who's watching us now, we're just kind of doing like a test run stream right now talking about this. We are getting ready to do weekly streams every Friday at 7:30 p.m. Central, beginning this week to discuss each episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. And let us know what you think of this format and how we went through this today. And if you're watching this later, if you're watching this not live, let us know. This one.
Am I correct, Father, that the one element of the format that won't be there is that we won't have time to have queued up visuals and stuff, right?
No, we will.
Oh, I thought you were saying earlier we wouldn't.
No, I misunderstood your question earlier.
I gotcha. But also, if this episode might have run a little long aside from testing purposes, we were discussing like a big, 45-minute long TNG episode, whereas these will be discussions of 25-minute episodes-ish?
Yeah. Also, we had a whole new set of characters to discuss in this TNG episode, which will be true for the first episode of Lower Decks, but will probably not be true for every subsequent episode.
Do we want to jump in with the subspace transmissions here?
Well, no, I'm going to do the Gorn eggs first, and then
All right,
subspace. But the Gorn eggs are what we call Easter eggs, in jokes, or continuity connections within the episode that we did not already point out. So I have a few of them here.
Let's hatch them.
I like it.
That's my new catchphrase. Let's hatch them.
In the opening scene in 10 forward, Ensign Sito mentions the Vedics of Bajor. Of course, we learn all about Vedics and the Vedic Assembly in Deep Space Nine. The shuttlecraft that Torque and Geordi are damaging with the phasers, the shuttlecraft Curry, which all shuttlecrafts are named after like scientists and explorers. This one in particular was named after Marie Curie or Marie Sklodowski Curie. I'm not sure what she's a scientist for, but something.
She was instrumental in understanding radioactivity and early nuclear physics type stuff.
Was she one who actually developed radiation poisoning?
I believe that killed her. That killed almost everyone back then.
Some serious ass science price there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they didn't quite know just how dangerous this stuff was, because in many cases it would take you years before you got the cancer and died, so it wasn't completely obvious.
Right.
Dave, why don't you look at those subspace transmissions and see if any stand out to you, and I'll just go ahead and name off these last couple of Easter eggs. The other one is we have mention of the Potemkin that Riker served on when he was a younger officer. And also, one of the rumors that is being spread around the junior officer poker table is that the escape pod that came over from the Cardassian border was carrying Ambassador Spock. And I really liked that. That was a cool connection to unification and what had been going on previously on Next Generation. And this is like, oh yeah, that's like one of these ridiculous rumors that people would come up with.
But does sound crazy enough to be an actual Star Trek episode.
Oh, that's actually pretty believable. Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, what would Spock be doing in Cardassian space? But if this was the Romulan border, yeah, that could totally be Spock. Why not? So
those are all of the Easter eggs, in jokes, and continuity connections that I spotted in this episode. I know that the show Lower Decks, they're going to pack a lot more than this, because I think just like the trailer for Lower Decks had more of what we would consider Gorn eggs than this entire episode. So if I ever miss any, though, you need to let us know. You can comment on our YouTube video or email me or let us know on Twitter or Facebook, and we might share that because we do like to have interactive conversations with our audience and listeners. So, Dave, why don't you go ahead, speaking of which, and let us know some of the subspace transmissions we received on this episode, Lower Decks.
Sure. I think these are primarily from Twitter. First one was from Dan Gunther. Says, I remember loving the episode from the first time I saw it back when it first aired. I also remember falling in love with Sito and being absolutely gutted when she was killed off. Held out hope throughout the entire run of DS9 that she might one day resurface. Very moving episode. Let's see. Indeed, Shuttle Pod 2. Is that right? Is that the name, Father? Did I get that right? Had the multiple sad face emojis and hashtag Sito Jaxa lives. So clearly this character made a mark on people. This kind of reminds me of, was it Arium in Disco, who only got the one episode?
Yeah.
And I would say this was a more successful overall structuring of, if you have to have a character who's going to live and die in one episode. I know she'd been in some other episodes. Right. But this was not that the Arium episode didn't do the best they could sort of in the situation they were in, but this was the superior episode.
She's also kind of adorable and really cute.
Yeah.
I think that really sells it a lot. I am interrupting you. Continue.
See, I would have been just as bummed if the Vulcan Tarek had died. I think.
But you're a weirdo.
Can't lose that level of sarcasm.
Ryan gets more excited over like, oh, a cool Vulcan, than like, oh, that's a cute girl.
Pretty much.
Joey Byram points out another sort of related one. Says, I also like the Voyager episode Good Shepherd, especially the beginning, how it started in the ship and in the bridge and slowly worked its way down to the lowest deck of the ship. That's cool. I haven't seen that episode yet, but that sounds dope.
Yeah, I remember a
cameo from Tom Morello. Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Holy shit. Let's see. That's it. Here's an interesting one from E. Kelly posted. Excellent ep, really one of TNG's best. Thoughtful, engaging, great to see the breadth of the crew and civilian staff of the ship. Clever, risky, and smart. I've shown my daughters Sito's and Worf's test scene for the valuable lesson it teaches. Trek at its best. I think that's pretty interesting. Somebody really bringing this into their real life. God knows that Trek has a lot of morality lessons.
That's awesome. You're raising your kid right.
Yeah, and that means they're going to talk back shit to you in their teen years.
They're going to do that anyway.
Yeah, no, I was just kidding. What it means is that they may be able to do it in a smarter way and less of a rebel for rebellion's sake. So I really think that's cool. Let's see. And then Elliot Lockwood kind of sums it up here. I love that episode. It's like, this is going to be a cutesy episode. And then, bam, let's kill one of them. It's really well done.
It felt like something Ron Moore would write, but I wasn't he on DS9 by then?
Yeah, I was thinking that too while I was watching it.
He's on TNG all the way. He was on TNG all the way through All Good Things.
All right, so he could have had a hand in that pot someplace. So.
Let's see. And lastly, I've got a comment from Adam Owen on Facebook who says, I loved it. in hindsight, it would have been nice to have an episode every season dedicated to the same group or a group of the same rank. It was one of many brilliant seed episodes that could have been so much more. Not to say it's a failing of TNG, but rather speaks to the awesomeness of the writing. I do wish that TNG had happened in an era when a little bit more serial storytelling was the norm, and so a seed episode like this could grow a little bit and be developed. But yeah, I don't really see it as a failing of the show because it simply wasn't the show that it was built to be. I think that's a fair point.
It also doesn't help that it's already season 7 and there's not much left. So, they might have said, hey, can we bring them back in season 8? There's not a season 8. Oh, well, there we go.
Well, this episode does kind of feel like it has some of that modern serialization and that it is using a character we saw from an earlier episode. They reference very specific events from that episode. And they're also using things that are very relevant to what is going on with Star Trek Deep Space Nine at the same time.
Yeah. There's some Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff going on there.
There's a synchronicity. There's some franchise synchronicity in this episode.
Because they were a little bit more ambitious with some of the filming, the editing and the poker sequence, the overall tight editing between all the different characters. It actually does have, I think, a somewhat more modern feel than some of the other Next Gen episodes. Honestly, the only thing that I would change, if I sort of could, would actually be something I would change with a big chunk of the Next Generation, which was go ahead and allow somebody to rescore it with somewhat more dramatic music to heighten the sad stuff and the happy stuff and all, and the scary stuff and all of that. I want a musician to go through and that to be their pet project, is to rescore episodes.
I am adamantly against going back and special editioning things.
I would have
unless you do it on a fan basis, not a formal basis. I just want to see. I kind of want to maybe see it done. I want to see it done.
I would be absolutely down for that.
Well, that's all that we have. But like I said, this was just kind of a test run to see how this format works out. We're right now thinking about doing these every Friday at 7:30 p.m. Central Time to discuss new episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks. And all of those episode discussions will be available probably Sunday night as an audio-only podcast. And you can catch them live or watch them later. But I am going to try now another experiment and see if I can get our closing video to play live. So
with audio this time?
That's the plan. Let's see if I have figured it out or if it's back to the drawing board. Fingers crossed. Do that thing, do that like that chant.
Please promote me. Please promote. What was his chant?
Oh, God. Well, it apparently doesn't work, but okay. Here we go.
The Bajoran chant of good YouTube.
Can anyone hear that? No.
Well, we can work on that part.
Well, we might have to do a special fan edit with cool music dubbed over.
Yeah.
I guess I'll have to
beatbox, blah 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 blah. Yeah, I'll have to figure that one out. But again, that's why we're doing this now instead of on Friday with the premiere of Lower Decks.
So there was no plot to release a review of Lower Decks titled YouTube video early just to drum up interest in the podcast. That wasn't a
good idea, but I didn't think about it until a couple of days ago when I needed something to do for this. But I was like, well, why not just actually make some content out of it?
All right. Seems to have a nice deceptive headline that will draw clicks. Well done.
Where Fathery and I are nothing if not fans of clickbait.
I don't think it's true. I can change this format on here too if anyone has a preference to it.
All right.
But we're gonna end the live stream now. So thank you everyone for checking us out, and be sure to watch us live on Fridays at 7:30 p.m. Central.
Hell yeah.